Okay, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Welcome everyone to the May board meeting for the Monroe County Land Bank Corporation. We've got a relatively full agenda. We'll approve last month's minutes, talk about insurance, the LBI award, some committee reports, and then some updates from Land Bank staff. We'll talk about if we want to adjust next month's staff or our next month's board meeting date. We will start off with an approval of the April 9th, 2025 meeting minutes. Are there any corrections to the previous minutes from that meeting? Hearing none, may I have a motion to approve the meeting minutes as distributed?
I'll move it.
Thank you, Anna. Orlando seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay. Oh, you know what? I apologize. Before I take a step back, let's do roll call. How about that? Kevin Purcell, Chair. I am here. Anna Liss.
Vice Chair present.
Amy Brown. Present here. Orlando.
Here.
Deborah.
Present.
Jennifer.
Here.
Celia.
Here.
Okay. That. We will move on to announcements and communications. The Land Bank, New York State Land Bank Association is hosting their annual conference later in May, 21st and 22nd in Oswego. Pat is attending. Amy also is able to attend. She's going to go for this, I believe it's the second of the 2 days. And Pat had requested reimbursement for hotel mileage and meals per diem. Amy is going to pay her own way, so she is not not requiring that. Do you want to let you jump in on this in terms of approval or?
Yeah, when you explain the policy and then do the rest of it.
Okay, so Pat has requested reimbursement for it. We took a look at the LBI funding and the different policies that were required. And everything looks to be in order. It is consistent with my incredibly abridged thoughts are highlighted below. We would be using the Land Bank Initiative funding to cover this expense. The attendance is consistent with our LBI funding intent. I had included a PDF and that's on page 1. The attendance is consistent with the LBI Initiative Grant Program, Section 5, which references expenses necessary to plan and implement land bank work organizational development. And we can use the $100,000 to do that, as long as we have an allocation for this expense in the budget. As long as there are no objections to this, I recommend we reimburse them for this expense.
You just outline roughly what the expenses.
The expenses are minimal in nature. He gave us an itemized. Travel was $104.86. That's the state required. The food was $80 or less. Lodging is $122. The total anticipated cost is $306.86.
I guess my only question would be, why wouldn't we do yours as well?
I'm only gonna go out for the day.
I'm just saying to be
I'm gonna go out for the day. I'm
consistent.
gonna take my car out there, it's an electric vehicle. It's harder for me to even figure that out. I just let it go.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just want us to be consistent, that's all.
I appreciate your thoughts. I really do.
But do we have the funds? Technically be mileage that we could, that would be within the scope of.
They're in the county's
the
treasury,
yeah.
we still.
If you are comfortable doing that, I will graciously
transfer
accept,
that.
although I'm happy.
Yes, and you're still entitled for your
But
per
he's
diem for the
paying his
day.
own way, and then it would be
It's only some
reimbursement
time.
when.
Yeah.
We just want to reimburse once we have money.
Right, Debbie had a question about whether or not we have the funds secured in the land bank's bank account.
Not yet. So we are still waiting. So part of this meeting is to authorize the final piece of the LBI award authorization. So we don't technically have any funds in the bank account yet. We do have them in our budget. We can, in theory, authorize the expense and then reimburse after the fact once we have the money in order. So no, we do not have the funds physically, but in theory we do, and so we can.
We prefer not to write a bad check. That's all.
Yeah, no, no. It would.
Start, right? Yeah, first one,
Would be reimbursement based. I mean, that's how the
Okay.
county does all sort of travel expenses and the land bank, since it's all in the same policy.
We just need to transfer funds into the travel account so that we could do that. We could pull that from somewhere.
I mean, we can, so we already know we need to make a adjustment to our budget based on the dues that are responsible for the New York State Land Bank Association. So that needs to happen, and so we have, and I know it seems like it's taken forever, but we have been diligently working to get all these pieces in place, which some of it's delay on our end, some of it's delay on the entity's end, like insurance and things. And I really anticipate by this time next month, we will have that all buttoned up. We already have a bank account that is open. There's nothing in it, to Deb's point. However, we do have access to it. And that's something we'll talk about a little bit later. So when we do have funds, we can do that. We can submit a reimbursement claim as soon as now regarding any of these expenses for the insurance to the ARPA funding that we have.
So ARPA will cover that. I thought, the other money covers
Oh, yeah.
these expenses.
We
not
can-
ARPA.
So there is room in both to potentially do that. LBI is what is anticipated for the travel expenses. The insurance funds will be coming out of the ARPA funds because we have access to those first, if we authorize that today.
Okay. And then do we also need to amend the budget for a hire?
Yes, yeah,
Okay,
including the LBI grant award as well. If you remember from last meeting, we had a discussion. New York State made it very clear that they're open to any amendments that are consistent with what their goals are. So we just need to figure out what our goals are and then communicate with them.
yes. I should be raising that under other business.
Yep, yeah, and I apologize, I'm jumping all over the place. We just covered, I think, 3 different agenda items. But they're all kind of tied together because we're at this kind of foundational stage, so.
back to this travel, just real briefly, just want to make sure we got it clear. So both tax, hotel mileage and meals and Amy's mileage and per diem. Is that correct? That's what we're talking about as a board, saying we're comfortable with all of that. Okay,
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
yeah,
Thank you.
okay, wonderful. Okay, on to our next item, insurance authorization. So Pat, Lisa and their group have been hard at work and got multiple quotes from Brown and Brown. And that was sent out to us earlier this week with our packet. The lowest quotes for the 3 insurances needed are a total of approximately $3,500. Wondering if people have thoughts about the notes that were included, the process. I thought that, having looked through the notes, I thought that Brown and Brown, a pretty diligent search, including a couple categories, or at least one where there's only one legitimate option. But wondering if other folks on the board have thoughts, concerns about what has been searched and what has been found.
These are both really strong carriers.
Yep.
And Philadelphia is known for D&O and business owner policy, so that's great. Travelers is well known for covering crime. And the pricing is really competitive, so I'm in favor of this.
That's a big combo right there. Yeah.
I have my insurance license, so I'm familiar with all these
Yep.
companies. That's how I just,
Wonderful,
Benefiting from your expertise.
yeah.
so nice work on this.
Pat, do you have anything else? I should have looked to you first to see if you have anything else to add that's not included in the packet that was sent out.
No, I think that this is the best option we were provided. We have multiple quotes from different entities going through Brown and Brown, so we met the spirit of the procurement policy, which isn't technically adopted, but we'll find more about that later. And so I think that if you're comfortable, I'm very comfortable. And I think the other thing I'll note is Brown and Brown also provides insurance brokerage for services for the county. And so that's how we established a relationship with them. And we're actually working with the Syracuse office, not the Rochester office, because they have expertise in working with land banks. And I think one of their representatives will be at the land bank conference.
Curious, Pat, do you know, if we give them the go ahead, the okay, how quickly it will happen is,
I'm gonna call them after this meeting, but I don't know how quickly.
understood. If,
As quick as they get a check.
Have to tell them what they-
yeah, okay, well, if no one has other concerns, can we have a motion authorizing the purchase of insurance?
So moved.
Second,
Second from Anna, all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay. Great. Next up is the LBI award update. And as Pat mentioned, we have a bank account up and running. I got viewer rights today. But go ahead.
Yeah, so LBI award updates, if you recall from earlier meetings, there were a few things we needed to tick off before we could officially accept that funding. Insurance and bank account were the last two. With this motion that you just did, we should be good to move forward with accepting this, sending this in as soon as, to Thalia's point, we have proof that we have insurance. So I will get all that in place as quickly as possible. And as soon as I can give you good news, I will. But we're gonna, like I said, I'm really hoping that before the next meeting, that will all be done, and then we can just finalize the signing of things with New York State.
Fantastic. Great.
Yeah.
On to committee reports. So we just met prior, we had a couple of committee meetings here just prior to our staff or to our board meeting. Finance group met, talked about your procurement policy. And I think if I speak on behalf of our group, we are the very close. There are a couple small changes, or small additions. But I think they'll be very minor, and I certainly think we'd be ready to approve this at next month's meeting.
That's great. I imagine you have a draft you can share with us so that.
Yes,
we can
yeah,
this
we'll
quick.
make these changes quickly afterwards. How about the audit committee? I know there was a review, we're gonna be reviewing the whistleblowers and protection policy.
Yeah, so we met as well prior to this meeting and we reviewed the whistleblower and protection from retaliation policy. Just minor tweaks, that, Pat's gonna do, adding some of the wording similar or consistent with the workplace conduct investigation policy, just to make sure his reference is the same throughout the policy. And then we also discuss, reviewing and adopting policies annually, and adding that to the bylaws in section 9, just to say in our annual meeting, we're also gonna be reviewing and adopting the policies so that we're always kind of reviewing them and making sure that they're up to date and adjust as needed. But like the finance committee, we anticipate being able to adopt these with the next meeting.
Excellent, that's great.
And we also discussed how we don't anticipate having to meet before the next meeting.
Yeah. And I think that's the same. Excellent. Anything else on committee reports, Pat, that you wanted to talk about? Make sure, okay. I think the next thing on here is other business, and that is our discussion of acquisition and disposition policy, as well as discussion of staff person and job description. And I guess we'll start with the acquisition and disposition. Do you have any comments that you want to make on this?
Encouragement. So I just want to encourage everyone to, I know we've been doing a lot of policies, which can be boring, and I know that this board has been meeting for a while now, and we, all want to see some tangible results. The quickest way to get there from this point is to thoroughly discuss acquisition and disposition in specifically using properties we've already discussed and trying to understand how we would go about acquiring them, for what purposes, and then how we would be disposing them to however we dispose them. And so going through those policies and kind of manipulating that in your mind, I think is the best way for all of us to get to that next step, where we can actually have some properties in our possession and be doing some positive things for the community. So that's kind of encouragement, and then I can jump in further if we want, but I would like to leave it up to the board to share their thoughts on what we sent out previously.
Yeah.
I'll underscore Pat's introduction, I guess, by just saying that, reiterating that with the ARPA dollars that have to be spent by the end of 2026, it would behoove us to move quickly. And also, I don't think we should necessarily look at the problem properties that have come in front of us as too challenging, because we have the resources. And I think it would be a good thing for us to clean up some of these more blighted properties that need a lot more TLC than your average property that's coming onto the auction. So I would advocate for moving, being creative and moving a little bit more swiftly. And that echoes, I think, some conversations I've had with my colleagues in the county executive's office too. There's an interest in performance and primarily that, you know, any of the ARPA dollars that aren't spent, we have to return, right? So moving expeditiously would be a good thing.
I would just echo that and just in terms of, it seems, in the market that we're in with a lot of, it's very difficult to find properties
Right.
that we're not gonna find likely find perfect properties. They're going to be, every one of them's gonna have some issues. But diving in and taking one on, we're gonna learn a lot, right? Especially I would think from the first couple, and there's no replacement for doing, right? So I agree. That's kind of high level. I don't know if people have other comments, general comments, or specifically about the policies or other thoughts before we jump in.
Only that the carrying cost would need to be included in a budget. For instance, if we're taking in properties, we need to carry them in terms of lawn mowing, in terms of tree trimming for risky, trees. There's a lot of things to consider.
Yeah.
We may need to include that as part of it.
We would have to, which Brown made clear that the pop-up property insurance is something that we can easily procure again as well. So as soon as we have a property, we call them, they will add it to a list, and we will then have a fee that we all have to pay. So there's carrying costs, but there are ways and resources to carry most of these things. But I think to your point, it's very important to understand how we're gonna get rid of these as well.
Yes.
That is the point. We don't wanna hold it on. We're not landowners. We are meant to return them to some productive use, whatever we think that is.
Yes.
So we want to find a way to take something that is not necessarily viable to on the market right now, get it to a point where it is marketable in whatever fashion makes sense for that property. And we can go into specifics about what other land banks envision. And that's really what the heart of the acquisition policy is. It lists different kind of like programs that you saw. Those are really meant to help the land banks and other places understand why they're taking on properties. And what is the goal at the end of it. And ideally, we should know that before we ever take on any property.
Are we still looking at that one property? Are we gonna explore others? I know we had looked. The one that was pushed way in the back.
Swansea, right, that's a great question. So I was contacted by the town of Greece just a couple of weeks ago. We finally contacted a couple of days ago. And he did reach out, and I told him that we were still reviewing it. But to that end, if we accept that property as part of the mission, I had asked him if the neighbor who keeps reporting it was interested in buying it. The thought was that he could be interested in buying it, but not for the condition that it's in, because the delinquent taxes are prohibitive. Then there's gonna be a demo cost, which is also prohibitive. They did get the great big truck off the property, so that's good. But someone would be interested in it if we were to be able to clean it up, frankly. No, it's not an expense they wanted to incur, and it could run $60,000-$70,000, and they're not gonna see that kind of a value out of it, so they wouldn't be able to. But we could, and then sell it to an adjoiner.
And I think to Amy's point, we can potentially put together the full budget, potentially understand all of the costs to the best of our abilities with the variables we know at this point, using our expertise, using, county law and some other people to help us get there. And then determine if it is worth it, if it's something we think is within the mission of this land bank.
Can we go look at it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Field trip.
Mhm.
And I've been there in person, but I think that would be, first of all, we can give you the address, so if you want to do your own drive-by, you're welcome to. But if you want, to go, I'm happy to meet you there and we can have a conversation
I was
about
thinking
it.
the inside, actually.
We'd have to get permission.
We have to get permission. I don't know how we go about getting permission, only because I believe the person has passed away. So that is how we ended up where we are, or
Right.
they have ended up where they are. There's no one to technically grant permission,
Oh, there's no executive.
so.
Yeah.
So everything would be a surprise. It's, emergency enclosures have, I assume that's who did it. It's all
Okay.
boarded up, so there's very limited accessibility to figure out what you're taking on. But given the condition, I'm not convinced that's a problem. It's probably a tear down anyway.
Okay,
In my mind anyway, that's what it is.
so if you tear it down, then there's other things that we'll have to face in term with the municipality, right? As far as the
Given the fact
rebuild,
that they're the ones reaching out to us, I don't foresee any obstacles there.
but we'd want to confirm that.
Yes,
Oh,
yeah. So, I mean, at a minimum, we would have to be worried about demolition and, you know, with the property of that structure, there's asbestos and things like that that we would have to worry about.
Yes.
So demolition, to Amy's point, would be the most expensive part of this process.
Mm-hmm.
The lot being the size it is, there's, to your point, if we wanted to actually do something with it other than sell it to an adjoining landowner, we'd have to work with the town to figure out what could be there. Based on current zoning standards that Amy looked at, there's not a lot of options.
No, there's not.
So we would either have to work on what could be possible with variances. Maybe there are some things, maybe there's not. So that's really where we figure out what grease we want to see happen with that property. And maybe that is not viable and we can't do any of those things.
I think we have to have those answers.
Yep, we need a lot of answers.
Do I hear you asking if we can meet with the town of Greece on site? Is that what I'm hearing?
No,
Or did I
I think
take
that a conversation of what the town will permit, meaning if we were to demolish it and sell it to the neighbor, that's one thing. But if we were to do something, or rebuild or fix it, then what are they going to require?
Would the right person to talk to over there be Scott Colby?
He would be part of it. I believe he's separate from the actual building code enforcement and, so.
Maybe higher up.
Yeah, so Scott is the planner over there, but, there's someone specifically who is doing building permits would be probably our point of contact.
Because we could probably have a friendly and formal conversation with them about it,
Yeah,
first and foremost, and then this seems like it would be a really excellent learning experience for all of us as we're just dipping our toes into this. Is the property available to us, given the Supreme Court decision? It's
it's
been,
been through two
auctions,
auctions. One
okay.
of the reasons I'm inclined to go to the land bank meeting next month.
Mhm.
Next
month.
Next week.
It's gonna be a long day. Is because I want to ask those exact questions. If it's already been through two, do we take it as the county? Are we able to just now take it? Or do we have to wait until the next in rem and then take it after that? Because nobody's gonna bid on it. Nobody has bid on it to date. And then we can get started at the end of the year. My talks with the town, he was wondering what we were thinking, because he's inclined to demolish it. I said, if you have a safety issue on your hand, please don't wait for us by any stretch of the imagination. You do what you need to do, but please know that we've not removed this from our consideration.
Mhm.
So just to clarify, it's still currently owned by a bank?
No, it's not.
The
It's
county
owned,
owns it?
nobody owns it. The deceased owns it.
Okay.
So that there was no executor.
Executive.
Okay, okay.
If it's a dangerous building, they have a mechanism most likely to take it down.
They do, and they've already
The
taken
town.
the garage down. That's why all that tarp is everywhere. Because they took part of the building down already.
So, Debbie, to your point about conversations, would you want us to invite people from Greece to this meeting? Would you want some people from this board to go speak with them? How would
It's just a conversation.
Okay.
What will they, what are they looking for? What do they what will they require if we were to proceed? Just a general
Back next
fact
week.
finding.
Okay. Maybe I can set that up. And then figure out if anyone from the board wants to attend.
And do they have an intent to take the structure down?
Right.
They do.
Soon, or?
I
And
think
then
he's waiting
what
to see
happens
if
is
we
that-
have interest.
Right.
If we have interest, then he will
Go back.
allow us to go through our process with it. However, they will take it down, especially if it becomes more of a safety hazard.
And what, as far as outstanding taxes, what happens with that?
The county makes the town whole.
Okay,
So the county will make the town whole with the outstanding tax. We have done for years.
okay.
Is there still, is it still a question then? Okay, so if the county takes it from the town and reimburses, and then the land bank takes it from the county, is the land bank paying the county that same equivalent back taxes?
I think that's my question. Yes, what we
You know, kind
incur.
of how that transaction would occur. I don't know.
It's not going to be a transaction that ends up in the black. There's more owed in taxes and in demo costs than we will ever see again, which is
Sure.
why it keeps sitting on the market. At the same time, it's in limbo, so if our goal is to remedy that and put things back on the tax roll, this is how that happens.
Yes, sorry, I think my question is the county looking for the land bank to pay the back tax portion from the land bank to the county?
Or is it donating? the
Or is it
property?
donating the property? That's.
So, yeah, that is the
That's a
question,
great
and
question.
it depends on, we as a county and the land bank need to have a conversation about what that looks like.
Yeah.
Other counties do things differently, and they, some counties do donate properties and then essentially wipe the property tax, so to speak. And then other counties will require land banks to purchase them for the back, at least the back taxes. So that is a policy question and negotiation that we as a land bank need to have with the county finance department and figure out what makes sense for everyone.
So that's, I feel like that's probably a conversation that we'll need to have sooner rather
That is
than
another
later.
conversation.
Um,
And in other counties or communities, there are sometimes standing agreements in place to specify exactly how that works. Some counties donate all of their foreclosed properties to the land bank, and that can be a headache, actually. Not every.
Yeah, I
land
don't
bank wants that.
recommend that.
No, and other counties, essentially play hardball with land banks, make them bid on them. So those are the two ends of the spectrum. And then there's some place in the middle where maybe you're having more negotiations that, what can we do that benefits the land bank? What can we do that benefits the county? And so that's, I don't know where we will end up, but those are the three main options that if you're looking at a spectrum, makes sense to think about.
Sure, the county could say, we've just allocated this money to you.
Right.
Yep. There's a negotiation to be had for sure, that.
And I think some counties, to your point, Pat, some counties work with the land bank. The land bank will go ahead and get ideal properties appraised ahead of time so that they send a representative to the in-rem foreclosure auction and they will bid on anything that's in that auction up until that appraised value as is. And that is something we could consider doing.
This property in particular, it sounds like will be diminished value because you
Agreed.
can't build on it, and the highest and best value is the neighbor. Right?
Likely.
So
So
land,
I wanted to actually draw your student distribution policies, so, these are models from other land banks, most strongly from the Albany Land Bank. And, there's different programs that they have, tenant to homeowner program, affordable housing, inclusive neighborhoods, which I don't think makes sense for us, and I'll explain why. But the one that I think is important for this conversation is the residential sidewalk program. And so that is, most land banks have this, and it's for essentially this situation. When there is a lot that is, for whatever reason, not buildable anymore, and there is a vacant or dilapidated structure on there. And everyone understands that it's in the best interest to tear down this property because maybe it's a nuisance that is attracting lots of things that people don't want. But you can't build on it. You're never gonna see a return on investment besides potentially getting a neighboring property owner to take on that, merge it with their parcel, and then pay taxes on that new parcel that they have. And that's what this program is specifically designed to promote. And so when I said earlier, we should have an idea of what disposition looks like, that's what this is referencing.
Yes.
It has been my experience that under a residential side lot program, people will not assemble it with their primary residence. And you end up with the same property again and again and again. So one of the things that we may want to consider is having them add it as a courtesy merge to their primary parcel, so that we don't keep having the same issue come up over and over again.
Then you just have a vacant lot at that point going through.
And then, yeah,
They move and.
right.
Yeah.
They forget to put it on the transfer.
I
There's
agree.
101 reasons why it happens, but it happens quite often.
When is the next auction that will happen? Is it like September?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not that long away.
But I think that's actually relatively good timing for us,
I
because
do
that
too.
means we can have some very thorough conversations with Greece, thorough conversations with the county, come back to this board more than once.
Yeah.
Figure out what makes sense for us and for everyone else, and see if we want to take this lead.
Right.
And we have enough time to do that, and then at that point, we can either, depending on how things work out, it could be pulled from the auction and then come to the land bank, or it could be, we could purchase it at the auction, depending on how all this works out. So in other words, I think we have we have the right amount of time to make this work and do the appropriate amount of due diligence. With still enough time in the season that if we know we're taking this on and we know it's essentially a demo property, we can also have, an RFP ready to go out the door before then to find a demolition company and be prepared to move between September date X and the end of the construction season. So with demo is pretty easy to do year round.
Yeah, I was just thinking of what Anna mentioned about using the fund by
Yep.
end of next year.
Yep.
Yes.
Even if, whether we take this one or not,
Yep.
after September, we'll know kind of what our property
Yeah.
options are for next year, right?
Mm,
Before
that's a
the
good
funds
point.
are done.
Right, right.
Cause if nothing comes out of this September one, what do we do after that?
Right. Are we permitted legally to competitively bid?
Yep.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we could go into the private
Yep.
marketplace and, okay.
So that's another option.
Mhm.
And often.
What are we gonna bid on though?
I guess we're talking about acquisition and disposition or purchasing and disposition. We would have to define that in the parameters of the
Right.
policy, right?
Right.
We could bid on homes if we thought if they made sense for the mission of this land bank.
Mhm.
Doesn't mean that we will find those, but there are, just like any entity, we have the ability to purchase things on the private market. We need to decide whether we see that as competing with other people.
That's where I was going with the
You
question.
know, I understand. So that's why we need to be strategic. If we do that, there needs to be a reason we're bidding on a property. We need to recognize that it is a property that has needs that are not gonna be met, or is in a cycle of kind of going through purchase and then going back to a landlord who is maybe not doing the best with it. So there's a lot we need to consider if we were to take that step.
Mhm.
And most properties are selling.
Yes.
I mean, it's-
Right, they're going vertically. I don't want to put Tam in that hot seat, but our acquisition rehab resale program partnership with the Housing Council at Pathstone, or sorry, Greater Rochester Housing Partnership. They are going into the private market and bidding, getting more often than not getting outbid, but their policy is to sell to qualified first-time home buyers that meet certain income threshold requirements that have gone through some counseling through GRHP. Perhaps there's a way for us to borrow that concept so that the policy is, we'll do the same thing. We'll try to competitively bid and then work with Greater Rochester Housing Partnership to help. They have a very long line of folks that are interested in becoming first-time home buyers and have gone through that program.
Albany Land Bank has got a first-time home buyer.
Most land banks
Yeah,
have
yeah.
some.
And those people can't, there's no way they'll compete with the open market.
Right.
It's not right now anyway.
And that's a really good point about partnerships. So as a land bank, have the ability to purchase properties and then hold them tax-free. So there's an advantage there. Our carrying costs are slightly lower than most other entities. And then we can figure out if there is a suitable entity, whether it's GRHP or something else, when we can do so through a competitive RFP. That would then take on the work of renovating that property, bringing it up to code, and then working through the following transactions as well to get it into the right hands. And that can all be a part of our process if we desire.
Mhm.
Do they do new construction?
Not at the
You're
moment.
talking into it by next year.
There was a period of time where we bolstered the program through, there was a partnership with the Monroe County Industrial Development Corporation. And we did a couple of new builds, or at least one. The student built ones,
I
right?
remember that.
Yes.
I remember that.
Yes, very much a program that ran in the red, but was impactful for the folks that benefited from it. I should also add too, that under the proposed skinny budget from the federal government, the administration, the funds, the limited funds that we are able to dedicate to the acquisition rehab resale program are going away, or proposed to be eliminated. Adding additional, I think, gravity to the mission of the land bank, so. But that was a great program when it was in existence, the new build partnership with MCIDC. Very,
I think Anna bring up a good point. So the original term land banking comes from the idea of essentially purchasing and holding on property. And we have time limited funds. So if we wanted to be strategic, we could try to acquire if we can afford to, acquire properties with the funds we have in the next year. Make sure that we have enough for carrying costs for however long it takes to move through the renovation process. But we could purchase properties and not necessarily have all the funds to renovate them if we want, just to be able to get them into our queue and then work through them, seek other funding if we don't have additional funding. We have LBI funding that's quite flexible and can be used for 3 years. After that, there's additional funding from Homes and Community Renewal that we could apply for specific properties and things like that. So there is additional funding through New York State that we should know that we're going to apply for at some point. But to that point, if we want to be strategic, we could potentially use the ARPA dollars in the next year to get kind of a stock and then work through that stock in the future as we have the funds to do so. Not something I'm necessarily saying we should do, just something to think about.
and I'm interested in, with the County Monroe Industrial Development Agency, sorting out, we're working on a housing policy, housing market assessment exercise right now, and developing a new housing incentives policy. I'm interested in establishing a path forward where it's possible that Comida can direct certain fee revenues to the land bank when developers seek benefits for market rate multifamily projects, and they're looking for they're looking for the board to not
Can't meet the goals.
they can't meet the affordability requirements. This is a model that exists in some other areas, like I think in Chicago, as one of our board members has pointed out. So that might be a perhaps a sustained revenue stream for the land bank.
I think it's very important that you're both going to that meeting next week.
A lot to consider. So I don't anticipate that we will make any changes to the acquisition disposition policies, but I think this conversation is good. Going through the acquisition policy, which we didn't really go yet, but we can go back to that. With Swansea, we almost see that as fitting this program, the residential sidewalk program. Not every property that we entertain will do that. They might have a different purpose. And it would be really dependent on what we're looking at. So like temporary community uses program, that's in the instance of maybe you do have a vacant parcel and you don't have a specific use for it, or the neighbors aren't interested in it, but it's something that needs to come down, whatever. There, you could host a community garden on it. You could figure out ways to bring value to the community, even if they're not monetary. And then there's a bunch of others, but each of these, are pulled from other land banks, and they have a little detail about what their goal is. They may not all be right for us, so when you're reviewing this, read these and say, does this make sense for what I know about Monroe County? If it does, let's talk about it as something we include in the policy. If it doesn't, let's either strike it or figure out if it needs to change. We don't need all of these necessarily. I just listed all of those that we have. Or that other land banks have.
Love that, lots for lots,
Yeah, spend a little, get a lot. Oh, lots for lots.
lots for lots.
Yeah.
We have lots.
And that's, I mean, that's the other thing is if we can find buildable lots in particular places, we could acquire those as well. So that's, these programs are really the heart of what we should be doing as a land bank.
And I was wondering about that, like, as we think through it, and I get it, like, some may not fit for what we know about Monroe today, but we don't know what it's gonna
Yeah.
look like 2, 3 years from now, and how inclusive do we wanna be to keep all options open? So when things occur, or if we're going down the line and we're looking at the utilization of those ARPA dollars, a lot might pop up
Yep.
that is easy to obtain, and we could think through the best usage of that lot. I just, put that out there for us to think about as we're going through, like,
Yep.
how more inclusive we might want some of this in our policies, just to keep our options open, not just for now,
Yep.
but moving forward.
I think that makes great sense.
Can I ask you, does anyone have specific ideas? We've got 2 draft documents that are kind of Frankenstein pulled from a lot of different places. How we get from where we are today to a final policy, just in terms of logistics. Anybody have best thoughts on it? 'Cause it does seem to me these 2 documents are gonna be kind of the heart of
Yes.
what we do going forward. So we've spent a fair amount of time on other policies that we should have. It feels to me like,
This is going with
this is a really important thing for us
Yeah.
to get right. But I'm just not sure people have ideas, but the best way to get to a final policy is.
I'm not an attorney, so I can't opine on the verbiage, but I guess I would just reiterate flexibility. It would be good to lean in a more flexible direction to give us the ability to do a multitude of different
Yep.
types of projects versus being very restrictive.
I think even if there's a program in here that maybe doesn't necessarily make or we don't see a particular use at this very moment, to Anna's point and Thalia's point, we could include it in there and never use it.
Right.
So it doesn't hurt to have that flexibility built into the policy. If it sounds like a good idea, we just don't know if it works for us.
That's right.
I think there's a reason to back ourselves into a corner necessarily, right? Yeah.
And ideally, we'll review this annually as well, and as things change, for the better or worse, we will adapt and find different ways to do things.
That was it for me, having the conversation in person like this is helping me
Absolutely.
when I review the policy in more depth, to kind of get a better context. So I know for me now, when I go back and reread it, I have a different perspective on it versus just reading it before. So I'll say, I don't know if we want to take the next couple
Carve
of
out some-
weeks for that, or maybe even before the next meeting, maybe just carve out time for just that policy
Yeah,
itself.
at the next board meeting, after we've had time to kind of go through it again, I think that.
And Orlando, are you saying even before the next board meeting?
Yeah, well, no, like kind of what we did the
Okay.
committees, if we wanted to have deeper conversations around it, or at the next board meeting.
Well, we could certainly share feedback in the interim.
Yes, I would, I think at a
Before, yeah.
minimum, I would request that if you read through this, I mean, essentially give it the old sniff test. If
Yeah.
it makes sense to you and it sounds good, let us know about that. If you read a part and either it doesn't make sense or it seems like, well, I don't understand this, I think it seems a little fishy, tell us. We need to be able to understand this because these are our policies. If by Frankensteining them, we've created things that don't necessarily make sense, I need to know that, and we need to be able to get that into a tighter form before whenever we're ready to adopt that. But I would hope at a minimum, we can, next meeting, be closer to that point, either by feedback or even maybe having a kind of work session before the formal meeting. If we all meet, it's technically a formal meeting, so we will have to do that, but that's fine. We can have a dedicated work session where we discuss the policy.
I like the work session.
Me too.
Yeah, I do think having all of us around and talking, maybe after we've each reviewed again.
And I don't think we have too much, at least in my mind, for next meeting's agenda. So it could be this work session and then the conversation about Swansea and what we potentially are getting ourselves into if we can pull together those meetings before then. And I think that could be potentially the entire agenda. Ideally, we'll be able to celebrate LBI funds. I don't know what else we have at that point.
Those last two policies we
Yeah.
approved.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
So I just want to make sure, because I know that I have had the conversation with the Town of Greece Building Department, and that was one of the reasons as much information was shared as it was. When I talked to their building department, they said that they were very flexible and that as long as it was built within their, their current regulations, they were happy to oblige. That's why I was looking at all the setbacks and everything else, just to give us all a clearer indication. I am inclined to reach out again as requested, but if there's any specific things you want to know outside of that, I would be inclined to just send him the information I've gleaned from all this research and say, as long as we are building within your code compliance, you are comfortable with us proceeding.
I think we need to ask about variances. Would they be comfortable with variances? on
He already
this?
said yes.
Okay,
Relaxing the setbacks.
yeah, exactly.
Okay, so just
Because-
asking specifically about variances.
Yeah, because the current footprint based on current code is very small. And it is gonna be a challenge to build a property that is resellable easily.
We'll put a tiny home in there.
Yeah,
Mhm.
which probably isn't allowed by code as well. It's usually minimum square footage in places like Greece.
You do like a 800 square foot house or
I
something.
think the number that was thrown out was 9.
Was it?
Yeah.
I'd be happy to take a look at their code too and see what they allow in the meantime.
That'd be great. Anything that anyone wants to do and share with us, we would happily take. One minor note that I think I mentioned last meeting, I tried to set up some shared services with some of the in-county stuff. It doesn't really work outside the county because of our security protocols. So if we want to create something where we can share documents more easily, we would have to go to like an outside service like Google Docs or something like that, which we can do. But I need to know if people are comfortable with that, comfort level, all that type of stuff. So that's just something to consider for next meetings if we want to more easily share materials like this.
I don't mind Google Drive.
Yeah,
Microsoft
I'm okay with that.
Teams.
I don't know if there's any reason that, from a county perspective, from a security perspective, that's.
I mean, we can set up a dedicated land bank account, and we can, we'll just have publicly, not necessarily publicly available information, but nothing that we are too concerned about, that is confidential, that we're worried about sharing.
We could add comments right to the policy
Yep,
Yeah.
yep.
in the interim.
That's what I was trying to do with the in-county stuff, and
Yeah.
unfortunately, our security protocols just don't allow that.
That's okay.
I have what I think is a stupid question specifically about the Swansea parcel. So you had said, I believe, that the town was considering knocking it down.
Yes.
Let's say that we determined that the best use is as a side lot. We're gonna sell it, we're gonna knock it down, we're gonna sell it to the neighbor. I'm assuming if those two options are available, we would wanna do it, that part of the land bank's role is to help out Greece. You don't have to pay for it, Greece, that's what the land bank. Or do we look at it and say, well, Greece has the money to do it, we're gonna let them do it? I guess I'm not, it would seem to me that would be kind of where the land bank is.
I think they're waiting on us.
But I don't know, kind of other people have thoughts, that's like, well, no, if they're gonna do it, we let them do it, right? I don't know.
Well, I personally, that aside, I think it's a great opportunity to work through the processes. Work through the demo, put it through a bid,
Yeah.
get everything set up. It's a great opportunity.
I think, Kevin, either approach is appropriate. It really just depends on our perspective and what we want to do and the resources we have available to us.
I mean, I think with this particular one, because of where we're at, it might make sense regardless for us to do it.
Mhm.
I just meant, I guess was thinking more in general. if there's a situation where a municipality has funds and we have funds, do we think that our role here is to step in and say, no, you don't have to use those because we are here to help facilitate for municipalities your abandoned, your properties are in trouble. I don't know if that's,
Well, in both
makes
cases,
sense.
yeah, it does make sense. You're talking about taxpayer dollars in both cases, because we're dealing with,
Mhm.
these are ARPA dollars. It's about highest and best use, and our dollars are time constrained. So part of our mission at this juncture is to move quickly and ambitiously.
Yeah,
And so they're probably more restricted. That,
Yeah.
of course, town doesn't have its own land bank, right? So all they could do is dedicate some resources to the demo perhaps, and then hope for the best, whereas
Yeah.
we can do a little bit more.
Yep.
So, and given the situation with flippers and these auctions, these opportunities are gonna be very rare, I think, for the time that we have dollars to spend. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I think the time limited duration of our, currently changes and weighs the conversation in a certain perspective, and we were having this conversation on January 1, 2027, it may be very different.
The other thing is, depending on their code, if they take the building down, because it's a dangerous building, I mean, this is how our code's written anyway. Then we take the building down and we take those costs, and it goes back to the county and to the tax.
It ends up on the
balance.
tax bill, and then
Yeah.
the tax bill does not get paid, it goes back through another auction with
Right.
that increase in the tax, you're absolutely right. And then the county makes that whole, that's a 2-year,
Yeah.
2-ish year pattern,
Yeah.
So that's,
maybe even.
So if we would be better off doing
Yep.
that than the town.
There is one other property that we discussed earlier on that is, it's in a similar situation, that it likely is a demo candidate, but is on a lot that is likely built large enough to build on. I know I've shared it with Kevin when we spoke last week. You shared it with us a while ago, because it's been through the foreclosure auction twice as well, I believe. But
corner lot.
I don't know,
Right?
oh, yeah.
Down the side.
Yeah, that is a corner lot, you're right. But my point is if we want to take on any of these properties, we might have the need for the RFP for demo for more than one property, which would be great. Some economy of means there, and then we can figure out if that makes sense. So that's another one that we can send out. Could I ask you to do what you did for Swansea for that property?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember.
I can send you the address.
I think it was in Gates.
It is in Gates. I can't remember the details. I have it saved, so I can actually bring it up.
5 Beechwood, I believe.
That must be it then, yes. Yep, that's it.
The one with the porch, yes.
I'll bring it up so everyone can see it on. But I bring it up just simply because Swansea's not our only option.
No, good.
That is not how it currently looks.
No.
No, I have a picture somewhere. I'll bring up my email, so I know it's in there. We don't have to harp on this, but I'll bring it up so you can see it.
I can just pass my phone around, so send it to me, and
Thank you.
it definitely is taken a bit more abuse since whenever the Google van went by.
And there is a chance
Which
that,
one?
even though
Oh,
we've been told that it's likely a demo property, but who knows, maybe there's another option for it, we don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, but I mean, it's better than the other one.
That's right.
This has some potential.
Well, I didn't, yeah,
Kind of like the
that's
inside.
exactly, if they
Oh,
didn't
yeah.
like that one, we're certainly not gonna like this one.
I mean, we're not going to be looking at pristine properties.
No, this is exactly why land banks exist. as a
Yeah.
Resource.
Right.
But in either event. Okay, so we will put together some more information on that one. And maybe we can even bring some of the talking points that Deb brought up about Swansea to that one if we have the time and ability. That one's a bit easier because it's likely a buildable lot and some other options. And then I think that's about it. So that, and then we have the staff discussion with it. I apologize, this is a long meeting. Is everyone still good to stay for a tiny bit?
Yes.
We don't have any action items, so if you do have to leave, it's not the end of the world.
I do have a 5 o'clock to jump on.
Okay.
I can stay for probably another 10 minutes.
Oh, we're good.
Sorry, Orlando, you can use that room if you.
Okay,
You know, this property, not to go back to it, but this property is of much more interest to me than the lot. And the reason
Yeah.
is we could put a family in here and actually have
Yep.
somebody make use of it rather than a neighbor who is just gonna pick up the lot and
Right.
add it to their parcel. And as far as getting on the tax rolls, what's that gonna equate to? Not much.
No, it's, yeah, especially once you assemble
And there's no other use for it.
it. It just wouldn't be a drain on resources, that's all.
That is correct. It just would be nice to be able to put a
Or you
family.
could do both.
Right.
We
That's
have the funding at least right now to think about doing both.
Yeah.
So I
It
don't
might be
think
good
we,
to kind of go through.
We
maybe
could
a
drive.
Side lot project and a, you know, a couple different categories in terms of
Sure.
disposition.
We'll be anxiously awaiting your feedback from the training.
very.
Yes, I think that'll be a really great opportunity.
all right. Start your discussion and I'll.
Okay, so, and this got, did the draft of the job posting get circulated? Did you get a copy of that?
Yes, thank you.
So, Pat had sent to me, a bunch of different job descriptions from various land banks across the, state, and in between the two of us, we came up with this draft of a job description. I believe, Pat, correct me if I'm wrong, there are some open questions in terms of, and, you could, in terms of where this job is gonna be held, hosted.
Right.
And we didn't want to go too much further down the path of the job posting until we got some answers from Monroe County in terms of if it's gonna be with planning or is it gonna be elsewhere.
Yeah,
But, go ahead, Ed.
I think it is worth starting the conversation about what this job potentially looks like based on your understanding of the needs. And then when we do figure out that piece that Kevin was just mentioning about who is actually housing this position, we are ready to execute it. I have, said at past meetings and I've made clear to Anna and Kevin that the planning division is really at capacity in terms of what support we can give you. Without bringing on another person, we don't have the staff hours to do so. And so the sooner we can bring someone on, the sooner we can do all the things that we are intending to do. And so that's why I am advocating that we start to have this conversation and try to get this as close to ready as possible. So that way, when we have some more answers, we can figure it out.
Yeah, and I'm not, I think everybody here probably can appreciates it already, but just because I've had to work with Pat a little bit more on some of this stuff, I've just got. You are working max capacity, it seems like so. And so if we can free up some other resources, I think it's helped the land bank forward, especially as we start to look at taking on properties and really kind of get rolling here. And the idea was, so as we looked at some of the job descriptions, there are everything from executive directors down to, I guess, assistants.
Mhm.
And this is, I think, somewhere in the middle of that. So you can look through the job description here, but, the idea being someone that can support Pat and Lisa and take on some of these things off your plate. I don't know if it makes sense, just have people review this and provide feedback, via email, or if people have thoughts now, or Pat, if you're looking for specific, get specific questions you want people to.
I mean, not specific questions, but I think I want to give you a little guidance in terms of why we have titled it administrative manager. I think the scope of work that we're looking for help on is kind of in that frame of reference. So we don't need a program manager who's overseeing the whole thing. The board is really doing that. We don't need just an administrative assistant because it's more than that. And so we looked at titles from other land banks, pulled together a variety of them. Administrative manager occurs in a couple, and what that is kind of a hybrid of that. So it's someone who is doing the day-to-day books, responsible for the finances, the grant reporting, helping with getting the agenda and meetings together, coordinating with the board, but is able to execute some direction, develop policies as needed, identify properties and do some due diligence, maybe not all of them, but figure out who they need to contact, potentially even do site visits and report back to us. So it's kind of this hybrid position that is, not the executive director and not the lowest level either. And so it seems to make sense to me in terms of the job responsibilities, but I want to let you tell me if you think that makes sense. And of course, you all have your own experience with positions. Does this, first of all, we have not inserted a salary range, so we need to figure out what that is. We would ideally pay for this out of LBI funding, so up to $100,000 minus whatever expenses we make elsewhere. So that is essentially the cap for 3 years, and ideally this position would be grant funded for those 3 years. If we're fortunate enough to continue to have funding, maybe we can continue to have someone come on. But based on your experience and qualifications in your jobs, what do we need to pay someone for all this work? Do we need to think about maybe there's less involved in this? And is this preferred skill set a fantasy? Which is often the case when you write a job description.
Are you considering this a full-time position?
That's another question we need to figure out as well. Do we have enough work currently to be full-time, or do we think we bring someone on part-time, and if they build it into a full-time, we are okay with that? Those are all questions we can figure out.
Do we have the ability to contract with an organization that could do
Yeah.
this type of work on
Absolutely.
behalf of? Okay.
Yes, depending on what the answers are to whether this is a county staffed position or a land bank staffed position. We don't need to go into that conversation just yet because we're still waiting on some more clarity from the law department. But that is really something that we need to worry about.
I think it costs a lot more.
To contract with somebody or an organization?
Sorry, Deb.
I think it costs a lot more. If you, I mean, are you referring to an agency or just someone
Well-
who does it privately? Yeah, no.
Either way, again, wearing my Comida hat, our CFO and our attorney those are contractual
Mhm.
roles, and so we're not having to pay, salaries and benefits and all of that. They're receiving some fee revenues.
Sure.
So, but I don't know that there is a model for that type of structure for land banks. Like you can't, there's not like a law firm that.
We'll ask for next
Just there, it's a
Thursday.
good topic for next week.
Right.
Add it to your list.
But
Yeah, go ahead.
Um. I'm just wondering, some of these things are like what I would expect Amy to be doing as treasurer, kind of, like, so I'm kind of wondering how, like,
Go ahead,
like
you're fine.
paying a bill, I would have thought would be like what the treasurer would be. Maybe I'm wrong, and maybe I'm misunderstanding what
You're
you guys
not.
think the treasurer's role is. So I guess I'm just wondering, like, is it like a office manager type of a role more, or like, do you really want it to be like doing what you're currently doing, which I think is a much different role? You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yep.
I know you're doing a lot of administrative things,
Yep.
but you are very much guiding discussions and thought and, the whole mission of this. So in my mind, it almost is kind of executive director-ish, because I think the role that you're fulfilling right now. Wow.
But no, I understand.
Do you know what I'm saying? Like,
point, yeah.
you're organizing everything.
Yep.
Not just
Yes.
doing administrative
Yes.
Yep.
type of
Yeah.
work. And
Yeah,
that's just my,
You're right, the back office functions, I think,
Yes.
are primarily where we have a need, and I don't see Pat and Lisa stepping
No,
away
no.
as thought leaders.
Yeah.
So,
Okay,
right, like
that's-
this
that's good.
role would be as more than an executive assistant,
Yeah.
but somebody who's managing the getting all of that paperwork in order such that Amy can put her signature on the
Okay.
check and things of that nature, right?
No,
Like a
that makes
part-time
sense.
office manager.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think you're
yeah.
spot on, Jennifer. It is more of an office manager role than an executive director role for two reasons. One, we're so new that it's scary to hire an executive
Oh,
director.
Right, yeah.
Um, And I don't think we have the necessary financials to hire an executive director who can actually do the job. So we'd have to hire someone as an executive director and underpay them by a lot.
Yeah,
And then that signs up, that creates issues.
yeah,
And do
no.
we really have a need for that?
Exactly, and I
Right
don't
now,
know that.
we're in the
Yeah.
building phase of policies and.
Right,
Okay.
right.
And Patrick,
Hopefully
is the thought that this person would report to you directly? Like, how would that work?
That is a question that we need to decide. So, and if you see up in the last sentence, the administrative manager will report to the planning department or board of directors.
Right.
It's unclear. It's something we need to decide. Where do you want them to report to? I'm a county employee, not a land bank employee, so that might be weird. So we need to figure out what makes sense.
Yeah.
The way that we do it with MCIDC and Comida is staff reports up through myself. And I am appointed as the executive director. So I'm a county employee, but I'm the executive director of those two organizations. It's a little complicated, but there's a model for it, I suppose, something to consider. Ultimately, though, the boards, those respective boards make determinations about, they sign off on performance evaluations, et cetera.
And does it make a difference if, once they're a county or land bank, when we think about the title, those type of things?
Yeah.
So like,
Yeah.
I think of someone maybe reporting as a county employee, maybe we think about making them an assistant administrator.
Yep.
Manager, fall in line to a salary scale that works.
Yes.
I also think about you moving away from full-time to part-time, just in a department right now that we're doing a lot of recruitment and a lot of feedback from staff, like a lot of folks don't want the part-time
Yeah.
jobs right now, unless you were getting someone that was a retiree
Okay.
looking to do something like that. So just those thoughts when folks are looking for benefits. Compensation is a lot of benefits to being a county employee,
Mhm.
which kind of sells the position a little differently. And then also if it is a county position, maybe we do a scan. I mean, we have so many positions, we could be working with HR to see, like with these job scope. Maybe there's a title that sits
Oh,
there already
Great idea.
that we might be able to replicate.
That, Talia, you must have been listening to my brain earlier today, because I wanted to, so as you know, from being a county employee, we need to find a title that actually makes sense within the current structure of civil service in the county. And I don't know that there's an administrative manager title anywhere. And so I'm meaning to reach out to Chan because she has some people or her role is more in line with this housing issues than anything. So maybe there's a title that makes sense over there. But to your point, maybe there's a title that you have or other departments have that I'm not aware of that we need to A, figure out, B, maybe there's a scope of work there that makes sense, just needs to be tailored to the position.
And I would like to be independent from the county. And from my perspective, I think this is not a county, yes, it's the Monroe County Land Bank Corporation, but we need to have some separation. That's my opinion.
So at that point, we would have to cover benefits.
Well, and there's a whole host of other logistics, I think, when you start talking about hiring employees around employment taxes and filing like employment tax returns and all sorts of, I mean, maybe get paychecks or something to issue payroll, but there's a lot of other stuff we need to like consider.
And
The moment you bring on one employee to the land bank, you're saying? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there are complications either way.
Yeah, okay.
But I mean, I think we should respect Deb's thought regarding,
Oh,
do we
sure,
want this-
yes.
Is this the
Yeah.
county? This should not be the county.
You're right.
I
right,
think
in
we
my
need
opinion.
to figure out what are the benefits of either way, talk about those as a board. And at some point, we will have a vote to figure out. There's not easy answers here.
But we may get some good ideas
Yep.
and glean some insights from the.
Yeah.
And back to your original, your point about the skill sets and it's hard for me to imagine we're gonna find somebody. Well, it'd be great if we found somebody that hits every one of these, but in addition has any experience with land banks. It just seems unlikely to me. If they had that kind of experience, guessing they'd probably be qualifying for a different position. Maybe not, maybe you find.
It's,
somebody
yeah,
that's
I can't say, I mean, whenever you're hiring, you're looking for a unicorn generally, and it's
course.
never that easy.
got- Yeah,
Um,
right,
yeah, but you try to find someone who has the necessary skills and you hope you can build up the other skills. Or support them if they don't have them. So I think that's what we would be looking to do regardless of whether it's a county employee or a land bank employee dedicated. So we have to just figure out what makes sense for us to carry out the mission that we you as a board of directors and land bank are trying to do.
And I think that was like a great point you made at a previous meeting, like if we were able to get this position approved and get them started, they're at the table learning with us. So that knowledge gap that we're
Yep.
learning, they're learning as well,
Yeah.
so we can
Right.
supplement with, as long as we've got good Microsoft and budgeting and proficiency skills that
Yep.
some of that other things I think will happen organic, like it's happening for all of us,
Yeah.
you know.
And I mean, to Jennifer's point, in a perfect world, we hire someone that maybe fits into this administrative manager role and they grow into an executive director.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep.
You know?
I apologize. I have
No,
to
it's
step
not
away.
We're overtime a lot.
This is great.
This is great.
Yeah.
Collier, do you think we should just reach out to Andrea or HR for this?
They have
on every
job
time.
specs for every county title on county website.
Okay.
So there is a bunch of things that you can look at.
There's nothing wrong with modeling it after.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, just
looking for right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Verbiage
Yeah.
at this point, yeah.
There's nothing wrong with asking for all these qualities either.
And to be perfectly
You're not
clear,
gonna
we
get-
did pull this from other landing, so it's not, Kevin and I didn't pull this out of thin air. We tried to pull from what we know of going on elsewhere.
It does say
Right.
preferred.